Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Marin Art and Garden Center webinar program. The sun is getting lower and lower in the sky as we go through these programs, and this is the last of our webinars for this year. We've been so lucky to be able to pivot to this way of presenting wonderful speakers like tonight's guest, and we're so glad that you're with us. It's certainly been a heck of a year. I'm sure everyone in the audience has stories to share about that. I'll just say that I personally am so grateful that the Marin Art and Garden Center has been able to stay open during this time. We've served as a real oasis for the community. The gardens have never looked better, and our staff has been working overtime to just keep the place welcoming for all. So please come join us. We actually still have beautiful leaves on the trees. The weather has been a little too summery for my taste, but there you go. It's quite beautiful for a walk. And our shop, which opened this summer, is open on weekends, and you can come in, as you'll learn later, and purchase any of Obi Kaufman's wonderful products, which we'll talk about later. So thank you for being here. It's fitting, I think, that we're ending our webinar series this year with one of our very favorite speakers. Obi Kaufman is a visionary. He's a thinker. He's a writer. He's an artist. I think he's really a poet at heart. He sees the universe, and particularly the natural world in California, through a very special lens that is his own, and his way of communicating about it is so inspiring for people everywhere. His books are a consistent bestseller, and we feel very lucky at Marin Art Garden Center to have an ongoing collaboration. This is the third time that Obi's going to be with us, and tonight he's going to be talking about his newest creation, The Forests of California. This book is amazing. If you don't already have a copy, you're obviously going to need one. It is so beautiful. It really presents this rich and diverse world that we are privileged to live in such an important way, and talks about its present, but also its future. And Obi's vision, as ever, is compelling. And I'm really looking forward to hearing him talk tonight. Obi, welcome.
Hello, hey, hi. Antonia, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Hello. Wow, what a tremendous and humbling introduction that was, Antonia. Your friendship and the community at large of the Marin Art and Garden Center over the years has proved invaluable and tremendously nourishing to me, creatively, intellectually, quite frankly, economically, and dare I say spiritually. So thank you very much for the good work that you do, and for welcoming me here to this forum, however anemic, however virtual that it may be, that I am now speaking to you in this extended community for the third time, really, as this is my third book, The Forests of California, which when held in my human hand looks like this, right? So it, oh, hello, there's my dog. The pleasure and wonder of giving a presentation from one's home office, 'tis the way. So this is the latest in the series of gosh, I keep using the word sprawling because that really captures the brick that this thing is with its 650 pages. Sprawling works, but I think I should probably use the word comprehensive. That seems a little bit more positive and a little less self-deprecating. Because as you see, like, I'm in the process of making big books. This is the California Field Atlas, the first one that came out 3 years ago. in the middle, I would put this third book, which is The State of California, Understanding California's Most Precious Resource, which is a nice little wedge here. And you can see that even by the mass of the books themselves, where I would place the priority, I'm not exactly sure if I want to follow through that metaphor to the end, because this little one inside here, separating these two, of course, is the royalty of all parameters within these natural systems that I talk about. Thus is my subject, my vocation, which is to describe not only the natural world itself in the context of how it works, I'm not really concerned with what it is. That would be the subject of a field guide, right? I'm not really interested in concerned necessarily with the where of things, which of course is very strange for something calling itself an atlas. I'm not really concerned with the where of things. I'm not going to tell you how to get anywhere. I'm not really concerned with roads. If you want a road atlas, you can go get a road atlas. I needed to invent a new genre. I needed to invent the field atlas, which is how these greater systems, these living systems, coalesce, writhe, and conspire to create this most beautiful, most perilous corner of the globe that we're beginning finally to call home. Not a place. What does post-colonial California look like after we have finally accepted stewardship going forward, after we have decided what actually is our responsibility towards the future, as if we care about the future at all? These are not works of science. These are not works of science. Let me get some art up on the screen now. Okay, I am a painter. My father was the scientist. Dr. William Kaufman III, if you need to know his full name, was the director of the Griffith Observatory down in Los Angeles till about the time I was 5 years old, at which point we moved to Mount Diablo in the East Bay, where I cut my teeth as a young painter and as a young naturalist, always, despite my father's daily lessons in arithmetic that led to geometry, that led to trigonometry, that finally led through the algebraic sciences towards calculus, Dr. Kaufman's son was going to be a mathematician. I said that I was not going to do that. I want to test. Always I want to test the boundaries of science, because that's how much I believe in science to be a basket for which all philosophy will ultimately move towards. To be finally ready and accepted by science is the envelope that I will be pushing. I am not a research scientist. I am very sensitive to what science is and respectful of that. This, I would say, is a literary device. These books make California out to be a metaphor of looking at the future of our human ecology as it is spread out across the natural world, and what that means ethically, morally, and even aesthetically. What is a better story we can tell ourselves? How can I divorce myself finally from this consumerist thing that I've been fed my whole life? This idea that society is ultimately just about taking things out of the ground in the process of extraction, extracting resources, and then using them for a bit for all that they are quote unquote worth, and then returning to them into the ground in the form of garbage, which seems to me to be a pretty poor solution to living a good life. So tonight, here we are at 5:13. I'm going to hold your attention the best I can as I run through some. Really, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some vocabulary. So I'm not going to I'm going to use these as jumping off these words as they are associated. I've got 11 words to go through here, and you're going to have to stay to the end to find out what all 11 words are, right? Because I'm going to go through them one at about 5 minutes a piece here. So we're going to see how this plays out in a pacing kind of sense across the subject of my experience, right? So we're going to go through them purely in alphabetical order. How about that for just like eschewing all logic and just like going, okay, completely like as the way the alphabet works. Connectivity. These are broad, sweeping vocabulary words that have philosophical and ecological and even artistic connotations. And I'm going to be going through them as sparks to tell you stories about how I understand them in the context of my work. Okay, so connectivity, the first word that I'm almost like thinking of I'm almost like sharing with you what it sparks in me when I hear that word. The connectivity, not only between habitat spaces, but between generational conversations. Connectivity. My father wrote books. My father wrote textbooks. Astrophysics was his vocation, was his profession, was the nature of his academic training and the nature of his gift. I mean, the guy got his PhD before he was 23 in astrophysics. Anyway, I've got his dissertation sitting over here. It's called 3 Problems in General Relativity. My father has been dead now for 20 years, and yet I am still having this conversation with him, right? This is a legacy that's ongoing here in my mind. He used the cosmos. He used the cosmos of his metaphor towards truth as it lends itself to value, right? As what is it that we value? What would be the true, the value would come towards the common good, would come from and towards working towards the common good. The common good exists always in the future. What is the value then of something like biodiversity inside of a habitat space that serves so many functions towards our ecology? The subject of that focus and revealing the magic of that story, the connectivity between habitat spaces, pointing out the deficiencies of 20th century conservation policy in the context of 21st century conservation going forward into 22nd century, which is the conversation we need to be having here right now. The device that I use most readily is this idea of consilience, the principle that strong conclusions about the nature of truth and meaning can be made from unrelated sources and even from generally unrelated methodologies. This is a generalized definition that was probably most famously put forth in the book called Consilience, The Unity of Knowledge by E.O. Wilson. He put it out in the middle of the 80s, and if you don't know E.O. Wilson, go find E.O. Wilson. He's our greatest living naturalist. He ran up the Department of Entomology at Harvard for over decades, and he wrote many great books, including introducing the idea of island biogeography in the 60s. And we might get to that story and we might not. But this is not a history of philosophy. This is not a history of ecology. This is me and my relationship to these vocabulary words and how I incorporate them into my own creative process. Okay, so E.O. Wilson introduces the idea of consilience, that human understanding comes from a marriage of the physical sciences with the humanities, that when ultimately aliens come to visit us and to learn from us, that they will not be coming for our sciences. They will have already figured the sciences out. That's what sciences do. They are able to be even if we forgot, if the human species forgot everything tomorrow, we could build our sciences back up. The thing that we couldn't build back up, the thing that is absolutely tied to our 3 million year history as a species, bipedal, I guess about 2 million years since the since genus Homo came into existence. The thing that is necessarily tied to that is our humanities, the way we think about the world in the realm of the communicative arts. In the realm of dialectics. Okay, there we go. A method of establishing truth between potentially opposing worldviews where thesis and antithesis work towards synthesis. Okay, so this is getting back to the idea that everything we know that is good in the everything that Western philosophy, the Occidental world still believes was either came from one of two schools, right? Either the school of Athens or the school of Jerusalem, as the philosopher Cornel West says, that really there are two sort of the anima and the animus. Of course, that's Latin. So going back to Greek, synthesis, tying together as opposed to analysis, which is breaking apart, which again gets to a creative force at work here between the arts and the sciences. I think too that there is this word truth that I'm throwing out there a lot, and that is certainly in short supply, isn't it, my friends? I say to the computer screen, knowing that there are probably about 100 people listening to me talk to myself in this room. Truth in short supply. I like Neil deGrasse Tyson's definition of truth. In fact, I've been carrying it around in my pocket, and it is hard to get out of there. It is a 3-part definition of truth, wherein the concept has 3 legs: personal, political, and objective. There are 3 kinds of truth, 3 flavors of truth, if you will. And what are we talking about? And what, if any, is there a context? Is there a platform strong enough where all 3 legs of truth can exist in one space at one time? That would be a ecological realization of what actually consciousness is, that would break us through finally to a new paradigm. That we have to let multiple things be true at the same time. Multiple things be true at the same time. All 3 truths coming together at once in a non-binary way. How about that for breaking our tribalist thinking? You know, I write these books on the forest, and people ask me all the time, are things going to get better? Or what's going to happen in the future? Well, I like that question, like, are things going to get better? As if I can answer that question with a yes or a no, when in fact, I wish that I could just make a brand new sound that means both yes and no, and might mean neither. Okay, so now we're going to get on to this first big scientific word. We're going to leave the idea of, well, connectivity was a pretty scientific word. There's this whole idea of corridor ecology that's very important and very telling to how we connect these habitat spaces. It's not just about drawing a circle around a place and calling it a national park. In fact, that is a recipe to create islands of extinction, when in fact, the quality of the connective tissue between these different ecographies or ecologies, ecography being a spatial ecology across a landscape, might we then preserve, conserve, and even work to restore the biodiversity at hand, which is our #1 priority going forward. Biodiversity holds ecosystems together. Ecosystems keep this thing called nature together. Nature is the thing that we all rely on every single day, regardless of what you are being sold. Ecology, the scientific study of relationships, life processes, adaptations, and the movement of materials and energy between the biotic and abiotic components of an ecosystem. I'm going to have to do that definition because I don't like any definitions that use the word or a piece of the word in the definition that is in the subject word itself. Ecology and ecosystem. Ecos being another Greek word coming from the Greek word for home, the study of home. Ecosystem, ecology, also the root of the economics. Ecology, you have to remember, is a scientific field that was coined by an artist, Ernst Haeckel, in the at the end of the 19th century. If you don't know, especially the diatomic illustrations, the hundreds of thousands of illustrations that he's done of microbes, particularly marine microbes, go check them out. They are among the most beautiful creations that humans have ever worked through. And this man, Ernst Haeckel, I think he was Swiss, might be German. If you know, let me know. Invented the word ecology that was then taken and entered into the sciences in the 20s, really, when the first ecological theories began to become the thing. Okay, so what do we go? We'll go empiricism, the philosophy, a pillar of scientific theory, that all knowledge comes from perceptible phenomena and is subject to continued revision and falsification. Looking data in the face. You know, I mean, I wrote the California Field Atlas, my first book, in 2016. When we were gearing up for a particular national election, and I was thinking that we were headed towards a pace that we're headed with a stride, with a you know, a particular posture that was leading us towards doubling down on things like the Paris Climate Accord, for example. We had a plan going forward that was interrupted by democracy. Thank goodness for democracy. Like, would we have even had the day of the season, the year of reckoning, that is 2020? I know there's a lot of hype that it was bad, that was fundamentally bad. But in the same way that fire itself, it's the first time. Oh, okay. Well, I made it 20 minutes without saying the word fire. Especially in the age of, in the year 2020, that's probably a record for me. Okay, so I made it 20 minutes without using the word fire, but here we are, fire. The day of reckoning. There's a fire inside, there's a fire outside, isn't there? This idea of justice is so new, as if we haven't even heard it before. At least I know that in my heart, and now I wake up every day singing for justice. If that can be the course of my work, then if it could be the course of my day, how about that? I don't even need to work for a lifetime. I just need to have a motivation to get out of bed, work all day long, and then go back to bed, right? And I think justice might be it. And let us always remember that I think Dr. King's definition of justice being what love looks like publicly is the one that I carry around with me. What is justice? Well, justice is what love looks like publicly. And in that regard, there is plenty of empirical evidence for it. Or as justice occurs, it is empirically demonstrable. Epistemology. All right, thank you for staying with me, guys. The study of knowledge itself, as evidenced by empiricism, to use that last word, rationality and skepticism. How we assume what is true is an epistemological discussion. How we assume what is true is true. What do we know is true right now? Whew. That's a long discussion. I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about my own experience as a painter in this world, right? Like, okay, so I'm not going to do math, Dad. I'm going to UC Santa Barbara, and I'm going to spend most of my time skipping class and hanging out in the Santa Ynez Mountains looking for condor. And instead, I didn't find any condor. This was the early 90s when there just weren't any around anymore. They have come back now thanks to love and conservation, but that's a whole other, that's a, good policy brought them back. Good justice brought them back. A fierce love for the condor brought them back. Now they're in much greater numbers, still critically endangered. Again, another story. Okay, fine. I'm a young man. I'm a college student. I'm backpacking, and I encounter the Chumash. The Chumash. You have to remember that California has always been the most populated corner of North America. And just like we were, I didn't grow up with the words genocide. It's always that the Indians made way for Western progress. What a lie. Because I knew that in my bones when I was up there in the early 90s, hundreds of art sites across the San Ynez Mountains, where you have like these beautiful paintings, such beautiful paintings, very abstract, 30 feet long, filling these massive sandstone walls of images of very abstract, like mandalas and vaguely anamorphic motifs that no idea what they mean. There's no narrative that is discernible to me in my modern mind, my industrial thinking. I make wildlife renderings because that is the mode that I grew up with, right? This is what looks real to me. How about that for an epistemological discussion? When I'm standing there in front of this, in this arrest, right? Like I'm experiencing the most beautiful painting that I've ever seen. It's completely off trail. It was behind a big ceanothus bush. And I'm seeing this painting and I'm thinking, I don't know what's going on. But what I do know as an artist and as a painter is that this is an artist who is communicating with their community an experience, a thought, a model of their relationship with the natural world through a very sophisticated lexicon of symbols, dialectics, visual cues, visual dialectics in this whole really complex system. And that's what I'm doing here tonight as I'm putting these little, putting the words next to the bird, like the word and the bird. What then is the connection between the two? And is there one? And is there one in your mind? Your mind's doing work on that right now because I just planted that in there. I didn't do it. I haven't thought about that at all. But what is that connection? That connection is wholly aesthetic. That connection is wholly you building new pathways in your own consciousness about how stories get told. Stories get told often using heuristics. Heuristics is an interesting word. It's kind of a word that doesn't get tossed around very much. I think I might be throwing out a lot of old-fashioned vocabulary. Forgive me if I am. Heuristics, a methodology of truth finding or truth claim based on a common set of accepted presumptions and conventions. Heuristics includes how we popularly talk about anything, assuming a common background of knowledge and experience. Like, for example, the world of emojis or shortened language, abbreviated language, even as quickly as that's evolving, we understand that. And we understand like all of these layers of symbols, like, and what is really being fed by that is this larger corporate world that is taking advantage of that and selling us all of this divisive rhetoric because we are so good at these tribalist heuristics. And I mean that in a very, that word tribalism is as a separating, as a divisive force between any given group of people. We can be so easily separated from, especially in California. You got the North and you got the South, you got the rural, you got the urban, and probably the big one would of course be red and blue. all I need to say is say 2 colors, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about on a level that you could all write books about right now. So how do we use all these tools to get to one place to talk about this one thing, this California, this hyperobject? Hyperobject is a word that I believe was invented by the philosopher Timothy Morton, who I think is still writing out of Davis. Maybe he went somewhere else, UC Davis again, and you guys in the audience know more than I do, so just let me know. Hyperobject, where phenomena, concept, and materiality meet within substantive or non-substantive objects of great size and over such great reaches of time that they transcend specificity. Okay, so now we've got this hyperobject. I'm always thinking about this thing called California, which does not exist. This thing called climate change, which does not exist. It only exists in patterns of meaning that we have defined based on our common shared heuristics, and the idea that we can talk about truth to each other. We are the only species able to do that. It's unique in all the history of the world that I can pull out of myself. Like, you can imagine myself like pulling a basketball out of my stomach made of energy, and it's in this basketball of energy is all of my animal instinct, and I'm going to hand it to you, and I can hand this to everybody all day long because I have access to this technology called the story. The story, right? That's our number one resource, the ability to trust each other with story, like you are all doing to me right now as I go on at 5:34 here. Ontology, the study of the quality of being, what something is, how it is, and where it could all be categorized as ontological realities. You know, what something is, or how it is, or where it is. Where it is. I think of quantum mechanics. I think of really getting down to what is life, and how far can we study exactly what life is? You know, there are great big chunks of my book, The Forests of California, where I'm discussing what ultimately I'm thinking more and more about as biological dark matter, where you have, and this again, you know, goes back to the connectivity with my father, right? What you have is like this incredible portion of mass inside of the entire detectable universe, blind to every one of our techniques to detect that matter. 70% of the stuff that makes the cosmos go is undetectable. Physicists call it dark matter. There's been some really fascinating new ideas about the nature of consciousness, the nature of information as actually having quantum mass itself as a force in the universe. Never mind that math is way over my head, and that we would have to get into a much bigger discussion of what actually evidence is to discuss the nature of mathematics, which of course, you know, remember you're talking to Obi Kaufman here. Obi Kaufman grew up the son of Dr. William Kaufman, who told him at a very young age that mathematics is the language of reality. And I still believe him because I know it to be true. Because that's personal, political, and objective truth, demonstrably. Biological dark matter. What is biological dark matter? 30% of all topsoil on the planet is fungal, is biological nature. What I said just then is that 30% of the dirt you stand on is alive or biological in nature. It's fungal in nature. When you are out in the forest and you pick up a good black handful of soil and you smell that, there are more microbes, microorganisms inside that soil than there are inside that one handful. Then there are people on the whole planet, 7 billion people and counting. That's how small it is. That this life is. This life is these little fungal creatures. They have what's called an algal biont and a plant biont, right? So fungus itself is two different kinds of organisms together, and then they do this thing called lichenize. Okay, lichenize. You guys know what lichen is? You know, it expresses itself as an epiphyte in the trees. That's just like one creature that sort of like lives on its own from the air and the water, and maybe with some symbiotic component living as Spanish moss in the oak trees. That is an example of a lichen, but it turns out that fungus in general can lichenize very easily, and it is doing it all the time. It is trading different configurations of resources that are actually organisms to such a degree, to such a complex degree, that it defies our norms of speciesism. And it's not speciesism, it's actually our forms of taxonomic biology at all. It breaks down binomial nomenclature, the thing that we use to define species. The biological dark matter. It questions the very fundamentals of zoological taxonomic biology. And that is a very exciting time to be alive, when we have gotten to that level of understanding, when we finally see how much we don't know. Then that is true knowledge. I was badly paraphrasing Thoreau there. Oh, now we're getting to a fun word here, right? Restoration. Okay, I've got 2 words left. Restoration, or restoration ecology, is the active remediation by human intervention towards the repair of a damaged or degraded ecosystem. Now, I know this. I'm 50 years old. I could use some restoration. That's a really dumb joke, because that's not what restoration is. It's not making the old new. What we're talking about is restoring those components within an ecosystem. Ecologists might talk about it, especially among arboreal habitats, as being granting the functionality of an ecosystem within itself to express a climax of that ecosystem within the terms of its own successionary processes. Okay, so that's a lot to unpack there. A climax forest is a forest in equilibrium, where finally we have a system inside a normal adaptive cycle between growth, conservation, release, like call it a fire, and then regrowth. This is the adaptive cycle, restoring that pattern, which should come at a clock, as a clock ticks. Okay, as a clock ticks, fire should happen across the landscape. Fire will have its day. It's one of our greatest ignorant, arrogant dispositions of the 20th and 21st century, is to deny fire its day. Fire exists in California in a way that exists nowhere else on the planet. I'd be happy to come back at some point and give you a full lecture about fire and where we are going. Remember, I said that the future is going to get better and worse at the same time? That's what I'm talking about. When we're talking about restoration, we're also talking about a pattern where California was not such a perilous place. Restoring those patterns. Remember, my friends, we were in California. We've got a $3 trillion GDP. We can do whatever we want here. We're the fifth largest economy in the world. Don't tell me there's not enough money. Don't tell me there's not enough labor forces. They don't tell me there's not enough reason to put all of those billions that we spend on cleaning up the fire in front of the fire. It's going to cost a lot more than billions of dollars. Build a restorationist trade skill, a union, schools dedicated to it. We know so much more now than we even did 20 years ago about how these systems work. Let's apply that and apply that politically, financially, socially. If I had a nickel for everybody with a plan, right? Let's see what S brings us. The last word, semiotics. Okay, thank you for joining me on this tour of basic philosophic terms, right? I think what I'm doing here is like what is truth, right? Like let's break out some words here that I don't like. I love that Einstein said, Einstein said, if your theory of the universe can't be explained to a child, it's probably no good. If your theory on X, Y, or Z, you can't explain it to a child, it's probably no good, right? So I've got this big, heavy word in front of you, and like I've been doing all night long, I've been putting big, heavy words in front of you, except semiotics is just how meaning is generated between beings on coded communication that may transcend linguistics being the form of our language, right? Here I am flapping my arms back and forth at you just to create a little bit of theater, I suppose, but I'm also transmitting a thing that I'm very engaged with you, and I want you to hear what I'm saying, right? So that is something that semiotically is being conveyed to you. Now, Noam Chomsky, the great linguist and philosopher, said that the evolutionary invention of language did not itself arise by the need to communicate, but by the need to think at all. And this gets me thinking. This gets me thinking, of course, about the nature of information. Words that are spontaneously making new stuff happen in you right now, and yet not, again, yes and no at the same time. There's no binaries here. This is all subtle and yet grossly manifest in your own consciousness. Your consciousness has form. Therefore, when I am standing in a forest and I am feeling the subjectivities, and there are thousands of subjectivities coming at me from all directions. These ancient trees have ways through their mycorrhizal mats. Remember, we discussed the biological dark matter. We have incredibly complex systems of semiotics at work in the forest. Perhaps the trees are engaged in their own pheromonic communication back and forth, describing threats, describing resource nutrient allocation, distribution. This is a different story of how nature works. This is the kind of story that almost feels to me like remembering, as if we have entered such an age of forgetting where we are children and we can just consume everything without any responsibility, as if all of our rights are just rights themselves and don't have any responsibility attached to them. And what more a false thinking of the world could there be? Every single responsibility every single right that we enjoy has a important responsibility tied to it. My goodness, this is giving back, isn't it? This is probably what a restored landscape would say to us if we could understand what it was saying. I started my second book, The State of Water, with this one. We carry into our future as many responsibilities as we do rights. This is our charge. We have the right to extract, but we have the responsibility to replenish. We have the right to develop, but we have the responsibility to restore. We have the right We have the right to we have the right to get our reading glasses. Stewardship then becomes the active management of leaving nature to its own devices. This is what giving back is. This is the restoration. What would that restored landscape say? Could we hear it? It would say, trust each other enough with the language systems, with the development of your own information, to have the discussion, not about how next week goes, not about how this quarter ends for your shareholders, but trust each other enough to talk about what 150 years looks like from now and our place in that California 1,000 years from now. The tools are all here for us to have that conversation, and perhaps it's not water that is California's most precious resource, but exactly that, trusting each other with the proper definitions. Okay, with that at 5:49, I am going to pull back, take a breath, and call on Antonia if anybody is there still listening. Hello, home base, come in. Home base, can you hear me? Here she comes. Hi.
Hi.
Did you enjoy that?
You worked hard.
I worked hard?
You worked hard, yeah. Yeah, that was a lot of unpacking. I got to tell you, my brain hasn't had a workout like that in a while.
Well, you know, we have a very limited time.
Well, no,
and I wanted to really contextualize this is a presentation of my work unlike any other that I've really given. You know, I had a talk with the residing abbot at the San Francisco Zen Center last year when I was invited to talk with him about this kind of thing, mind in the forest, and how do we actually even talk about self and consciousness. And I think the best that we can do in an hour is just throw out 10 words and try and work through those definitions, because all that stuff is in my book, I hope.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about your book now, Obi. I think you should stop sharing your screen so we can see you better.
Oh, very good, very good.
Okay, and then people who are watching, there is a Q&A opportunity, and you are welcome to type your questions in, and I'm going to try to field them for Obi so that he doesn't have to look at 16 different things at once. But there was a question that I saw as you were talking that I think is a nice way to kick this off, because all the work that you do expresses itself. I mean, we're really lucky to see you in person, right? But your books really carry your message in such an important way. And I'm someone who loves books, so I'm interested in books. And this person in the audience is asking what books might have inspired you along the way.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I read every day. I devour it. I feel like a book is not only a thing on the shelf, but a trail. And this comes from a backpacker, right? A book itself is a trail through mind itself, traversing the mile after mile of printed word is a joy and a singular pleasure of the human intellect. I am today. I think I'll just tell you what I have on my shelf right now, on my bedstand, as it were. I have a nice reading nook, and I've certainly gone through title after title this year. I've got Ursula Le Guin's Dancing on the Edge of the World, which is a series of essays by one of our great Bay Area writers who is best known for her science fiction work, including The Dispossessed and The Left Hand of Darkness. In this series of essays, she talks about one of the themes that I brought up tonight, which is the idea of remembering as being more important than discovering. Remembering on a cultural level things that were lost. So that's a fantastic one. That would be Ursula Le Guin. Again, let's just stick with let's stick with women authors. I have been making my way through Naomi Klein's "This Changes Everything," which I've read in pieces before. She's put out a number of books since then. Uh, this is her seminal work on climate change, and the impetus for me calling it not climate change in the book, but climate breakdown, as being more uh, genuine to the processes, that the chaotic processes that a atmospheric rise of temperature on a global level will spark and are sparking. And so that's Naomi Klein, This Changes Everything.
Yeah.
And I've also been reading Camille Paglia's Break, Blow, Burn, where she presents 42 of the world's great poems and analyzes them in a in her singular sort of like affected New York intellectual manner, which is delightful, sardonic, acidic at times, and super fun. Camille Paglia, Break, Blow, Burn. Yeah, so that's a good one too. But I think that book is probably about 20 years old now. So, I mean, go through the 2020 books that have just come out. We've got a couple of great ones. I've been reading Humankind by Rutger Bergman, who also wrote Utopia for Realists, and he is a Dutch economist historian who is talking much like Simon Pinker did in the Better of Our Angels, about how things could get better, and the nature of things now, and how bad are we off right now, which as a prisoner, as a joyful prisoner of hope that I am, I appreciate and I find great fuel and fire then inside of all of that data from a good hardened economist historian.
Okay, well that's an inspiring reading list for sure. I'm anxious to hear you just say a few words about the book, about the Forests of California and what's in it, because I think you talked about a lot of things, but I see beautiful artwork. I see wonderful ways of kind of classifying and organizing the content, which I suspect comes from your dad, that you're really good at sorting, right? And highlighting differences between things and similarities.
The main mechanic in the book, just to break it down as quickly as possible, is, how do I go over the whole thing and describe this thing at scale, right? This is all about arboreal habitat, and the more than half of the 100+ million acres that is California is covered by it, and the character of all those different kinds of arboreal habitat and how they exist in what I was talking about before, which was the adaptive cycle between growth and conservation of their own system across the forest body, until finally they are released energetically in the form of fire more times than not across the Golden State, and then they come back. How every single arboreal habitat has a strategy to not only be adaptive to fire, but in many cases be dependent upon it and its regular return. And then so I sort of break it down at scale between 3 levels. You can always imagine like a nest, 3 nested concentric circles, right? In the first one, we've got tree associations, and I've got more than 100 of those, right? Like, what kind of trees kind of grow together, right? And they all happen in these patterns across these regularized habitat systems, which is in fact the second circle, which would be the habitat, right? When you start so you get enough trees together, and all of a sudden you start attracting all this other forms of life, all of these other forms of flora and fauna, from the understory to the different trophic levels within the ecosystem, the habitat area itself, of from the rabbits to the bears, and then we've got the third level, the big level, which is I go through every single one of the 23 national forests in California with all of these are just hand painted maps again and again, discussing more than anything the nature of old growth, and I go over very detailed percentages of acreages within old growth of all of these different kinds of mainly coniferous trees, right? So how much, like a white fir old growth forest is much different than a ponderosa pine old growth forest, which is much different than a redwood old growth forest. And I go through all of that together. And so you're beginning to see why this book is 650
for
pages, right?
sure.
So
Yeah.
it's well, like I opened with, right? It's not sprawling, it's comprehensive. Okay, how about
Comprehensive.
that?
And it's very rich in illustrations. How did you count how many birds and trees and critters you have in
Oh,
there?
no. I got better things to do. I'm all I knew, and the thing that I you know, I mean, I sold my first book on this premise to the publisher, right? I want every page to drip with color and salt. You know, because I'm not making a textbook here. This is not a
Right.
textbook
Right.
of ecology.
Yeah.
I'm not going to leave you alone with the facts. I'm gonna shove down your face how beautiful it all is.
Well, and what you've done so in such a particular way, and you said the words tonight, is that you've shown us how you see these things.
Right.
And so that even if it's a little impressionistic, we can really say, oh, yes, that is a ponderosa pine. I get it.
Right,
it's quite met without being literal. It's
right.
Very distinctive.
Well, that was one of the biggest challenges, Antonio. I'll just be confessional here for a moment. Like, you know, the first draft of this book, I sort of like went off the deep end, even went like left of.
Oh, you?
Left.
Imagine that.
Left of the field atlas, and I was like wholesale inventing, like rebranding California nature.
I see.
And when I turned it, and my publisher turned it over to a few biologists to review and that kind of thing, I wouldn't claim that this is actually like a peer-reviewed work, but it is edited and reviewed by experts in the field. And what came back to me critically, and I think, you know, the powers that be for this, is that there was a level of like, I can't find my California in this book, which was sort of a horrifying like realization. It's like, oh no, I don't want that. I want every California naturalist, however amateur or professional, to be able to find their California in this book. I have this honor of making this book called The Forests of California. I want to respect expectations over that, while at the same time delivering this whole new platform and way of thinking about it that hopefully serves this larger idea of justice, serves this idea of actionable hope for a future that is plugged into all of these circular resources that can sustain and provide us indefinitely, were we to remember how they work and how they function and reciprocate them.
Okay. Well, Obi, I have one more question which relates to a question that I was going to ask you, but one of our audience members is curious to hear about the progress of your visiting all the counties as part of your book tour, because I think last time you talked to us, you were planning a very big trek. So what's next for you?
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. You guys are actually paying attention to me.
Sure.
Whoa be the blessing, woe be the curse. So what's happening? Okay, guys, everybody calm down. It's not going to happen for a long time because I've got 3 more books to write. I'm working on the coasts of California right now, which will be the next field atlas, and it might even be thicker than the forests.
Oh boy.
It might even be bigger. The second in the California Lands trilogy, after the forests of California, will be the coast of California. And then I'm doing the deserts of California. And then I'm going to bookend the state of water with the state of fire, how, where, and why California burns. So I'm writing this whole Game of Thrones of California nature, right? 6 books, right? So it's going to be a big thing, but they're all going to be here in the next 2.5 years. And at that point, I am taking a year and I'm walking around the state. I'm doing a walking tour of California. It's not going to be in every county. I don't suspect that I will be going up to Modoc County. I love Modoc County because I like Eastern Oregon. It's a good way to get through there. But that top northeastern corner of the state is not one that I think I'll get to on that tour. There's plenty of reasons to go there. But all 58 counties of California, and getting actually my foot inside of all of those counties is not the point at all. The point is to just walk and enjoy the circuit of the Sierra Nevada, the Klamath Mountains, the coastal ranges north and south, the transverse ranges, the peninsula ranges, and all of that connective area in between. So yes, if anybody wants to join me, and I think this is our last question, yeah? If
This is
anybody
our
wants
last
to join
question,
me,
yes.
email me anyway. If you have any questions or you want to talk about any of this stuff, email me. My email is coyoteandthunder@gmail.com. There is no guarantee that I'm going to get back to you in any kind of timely manner, but I really appreciate you, my audience tonight, and this opportunity to talk.
Well, thanks for spending this time with us, Obi. It's, as always, just inspiring to feel the energy that you bring to this really important subject, and this life work that you've cut out for yourself is really helping us all. So thank you for your generosity in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Antonio.
Yes.
Right back at you. I trust that you will have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you.
And I hope that you and everyone there at Marin Art and Garden Center remains well and safe.
Thank you. Thank you for that wish, and the same to my wonderful audience. And we're just going to give you the information about how to get Obi's books, his digital lithographs, and some wonderful note cards that I use all the time. So that's going to come up on your final screen here. And for now, good night, and I hope to see you all again soon.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Obi.